Nightcast. Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth brings you the current news from the world today and how it relates to Bible prophecy. Ending the end-time events leading to the peaceful world tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth.
Well, greetings, friends, and welcome to this January 21st, 2014 edition of Nightcast. Our opening story tonight in the news, the U.S. snowstorm hits sub-zero temperatures.
Here we go again. Much of the U.S. bracing for the return of frigid Arctic conditions. Remember this? Just 2 weeks ago, the country was paralyzed by a deep freeze. Cars in Pennsylvania frozen to the ground. Fountains in the deep south turned into ice sculptures. Rivers transformed into glaciers. Well, it's back. A new polar plunge is expected to spread sub-zero temperatures from the Midwest to the Northeast. 11 states under advisories waking up to bitter cold and bone-chilling winds. In Chicago, where we saw the cold air rush in when this man opened his window, today areas around the Windy City expecting as much as 2 inches of snow an hour. It will feel like 22 degrees below zero, and it's heading east.
Heavy snow spreads from West Virginia to the eastern seaboard, up and into coastal New England. Some spots as much as 6 to 12 inches. That includes Long Island, the New York City area, back on towards D.C.
Crews in Virginia are working round the clock to prepare, spraying roads to keep the ice and snow from sticking. These plows on Long Island stand at the ready.
If the storm stays on track, it's perfectly timed to disrupt the evening commute home. I hope it's not going to get too bad before I get home.
While this new blast is not expected to be quite as cold as the polar vortex we experienced earlier in the month, it could hold on for longer. This new chill is expected to last until the weekend. Mary Bruce, ABC News, Washington.
And thank you, Mary. And friends, more bad weather in the news. That relates to, let's take a look at our chart for a moment, that relates to the fourth seal. In the book of Revelation, from Revelation 6, the fourth seal is depicted as a pale horse with a rider who's named Death, alongside whom Hades, the hell, the grave, rides. And its activities were described in plain language by Jesus Christ in Matthew 24, Mark 13, Luke 21, as loimos, disease epidemics, pestilence, the plagues of Egypt, seismus, commotions in the air and commotions on the ground. The commotions in the air are explained in the English-Greek lexicons as gale force winds of all kinds. And that includes this crazy weather that we've been having, and the bad weather and flooding has battered much of southwest and southern Britain. And friends, it has left an agricultural condition that is going to cause food shortage problems. It's left many farms covered by floodwater.
The meadows and wheat fields of Somerset, deep underwater. James Winslade's farm is one of many, flooded out for weeks on end.
How much of this is underwater? Everything, bar a tiny little strip between the two
every
farms.
One of these fields, everything?
Everything, including this property here.
A massive problem, and for James, a new one. Flash floods here are common, but now, for a second year running, there's been standing water on the farm for weeks. Crops are rotting in the ground, the grass to feed 600 head of cattle is ruined. Many farmers blame the build-up of silt in drains and rivers, which slows the flow of water off the land. And they want more action from the Environment Agency.
Clean the blooming river out. You know, everybody knows what needs to be done. Just listen to us and do it.
They are trying. The Environment Agency is doing all it can to get the water off the fields and back into the rivers.
Well, these pumps have been going flat out day and night for weeks now. But every time the water level starts to drop, the rains come again. And that means the farmland all around here is still underwater.
With the scale of the problem across the country, it is, as always, a question of cash. Some £45 million of public money has been spent on dredging and weed clearing in the past 12 months. But protection for communities comes first.
The priority at the moment is homes and businesses, and much of the farmland we see is natural floodplain. It's the areas which have always flooded, so we have to recognise the reality of nature working to use the floodplains in the way they always have done.
The reality for farmers then is if they want better drainage, they may have to pay for it themselves. A tough message for those who've already lost thousands and whose land is still deep in flood. Jeremy Cook, BBC News, Somerset.
Thank you, Jeremy. And friends, that's not the only flooding going on around the world. The Philippines has been facing another tropical storm only 2 months after the deadliest typhoon ever to hit the country. And listen, friends, I want you to really notice those words. The deadliest typhoon ever to hit the country. And when we get into conditions like that, when you see these seals of Revelation accelerate, that should tell you that summer is nigh. It's at the door. It's right at your nose. Floods and mudslides caused by tropical depression. And if you should know what I mean when I say summer is nigh, it's at the nose. We're talking about the second coming of Jesus Christ. That should not be a ha-ha story, you know. Ha-ha-ha, Jesus Christ returning, laughed the journalist. Oh no, it's a real thing that is definitely going to happen. And all of these accelerating conditions tell you it's going to be sooner than later, and perhaps much sooner than some have thought. Again, floods and mudslides caused by tropical depression, Agaton, have forced the evacuations of thousands of families from the southern Philippines. Mariko Oy reports.
Villages under the water, affecting those who survived the country's deadliest typhoon just 2 months ago. More than 100,000 families in the southern Philippines were evacuated after days of continuous rains that resulted in floods and mudslides. They forced residents to flee to higher ground, using schools and local government buildings as evacuation centers.
We're in a grave situation. No food, no milk for the children. It's wet everywhere, and we have no place to sleep.
It's a stark reminder, says the United Nations, that more needed to be done to help millions of people who are living in shelters after being displaced by Typhoon Haiyan. The country gets hit by an average of 20 storms and typhoons each year, along with frequent earthquakes. The UN says the temporary shelters given to Haiyan survivors are not strong enough for the extreme weather. Mariko Oy, BBC News.
And friends, the Davos Economics Forum. We have a very special video prepared by the BBC that will explain in 90 seconds what this economic forum is all about. And friends, business and global political leaders are heading for the Swiss ski resort of Davos for the 2014 World Economic Forum. When it began in 1971, the Davos summit focused on European economic issues, but the agenda has grown to include wider global concerns, as you just saw in this 90-second outline. The video you just saw was produced by Michael Hurst. Thank you very much, Michael. Very good job on that. And we ran out of time on Sunday, friends, to be able to show you a video clip of a restaurant explosion in Afghanistan. A number of Afghan officials have been suspended as an investigation. Excuse me, friends, as an investigation. That was an excellent lunch there with you tonight, Fred. I had a lunch shortly before broadcast time, and so please pardon me, friends, and enjoyed your company there, Fred. Fred, new viewer tuning in tonight, so hope you found us and figured out how to tune in okay, Fred. But back to the bomb in the restaurant on Sunday. It was a suicide bomb and gun attack in Kabul that killed 21 people. The Taliban has admitted targeting a busy Lebanese restaurant, leaving 13 foreigners and 8 Afghans dead. We have video on that. Are we ready? Caroline Wyatt reports from Kabul.
The wreckage of what had been a special place for Westerners and wealthier Afghans alike. One of the rare restaurants in this city where they could mix and relax. All that shattered in a heartbeat by a suicide bomber and 2 attackers armed with AK-47s. They went through the restaurant, shooting dead families and colleagues out for Friday night dinner. Amongst the dead, 4 of the UN staff here, as well as the head of the International Monetary Fund in Afghanistan. Today it was confirmed that one of the British victims was a Labour candidate for the European elections called Del Singh. Today his friends paid tribute to him and expressed their shock. The other Briton killed was former soldier Simon Chase, a father of 2 from Liverpool. He'd settled with his fiancée in Northern Ireland, where he'd worked as a doorman in a bar.
The staff that worked with him commented that he was a true gentleman, a great friend, and had a nature that couldn't see the wrong in anyone. Obviously they're very upset today.
This restaurant was one of the very few in Kabul where Westerners and others felt safe because security here was seen as tight. But the suicide bomber bypassed all of that by simply blowing up the entrance, and with it the sense that anywhere in Kabul could be seen as secure. Today the clearing up began in earnest, although neighbours of the restaurant are still in shock. Nadia Rahmani lives in the house opposite. She told me what happened.
All of a sudden the blast happened. I screamed, we jumped. It was machine gun, heavy fighting. I was shaking. I hid myself behind a curtain to stay safe in a safe place. A lot of people has passed away and got killed, and I can see the blood outside, so that's sad. It makes me very upset. Hopefully I'm going to get over it, but it's not easy because I knew the owner of the restaurant and I knew the guards.
This year Afghanistan faces elections, then the withdrawal of NATO combat troops, and this attack in the heart of the capital has again shattered hopes of peace. Caroline Wyatt, BBC News, Kabul.
Okay, very sad story, friends. All right, I've got a report now that we have no video on this. I'm going to have to cold read it to you. This relates to the coming conference tomorrow, an international conference to find a political solution to the conflict in Syria is set to begin in Switzerland tomorrow. For months, UN, US, and Russian diplomats have struggled to persuade both sides to attend what has become known as Geneva II. The UN the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon has said it would be unforgivable not to seize this opportunity to end a conflict that has left more than 100,000 people dead and driven 9.5 million from their homes. And I've got another picture that relates to this with the caption reading, "How come a peace conference is being held now?" The leading Syrian rebel groups have said they reject the peace conference. In May 2013, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry and Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov agreed to try to bring both sides to the table to end the bloodshed, Mr. Kerry said. Mr. Kerry said the alternative was that Syria heads closer to an abyss, if not over the abyss, and into chaos. However, initial attempts to convene a conference failed. Their initiative gained greater impetus after a chemical weapons attack on the outskirts of Damascus killed hundreds of people on the 21st of August 2013. On the 27th of September, the UN Security Council unanimously adopted Resolution 2118, which demanded the destruction or removal of Syria's chemical stockpile by mid-2014. It also called for the convening as soon as possible of an international conference on Syria to implement the Geneva Communique and for all Syrian parties to engage seriously and constructively and be committed to the achievement of stability and reconciliation. Now, what is the Geneva Communique? The conference will move to UN headquarters in Geneva after an opening meeting in the town of Montreux. The communique was issued on the 30th of June 2012 after a meeting in the Swiss city of Geneva of the UN-backed Action Group for Syria. It states that any political settlement must deliver a transition that offers a perspective for the future that can be shared by all in Syria, establishes clear steps according to a firm timetable towards the realization of that perspective, can be implemented in a climate of safety for all. Stability and calm is reached rapidly without further bloodshed and violence, and is credible. Now, the Syrian government is accused of torture and abuse. Friends, in this next video report we have for you, there's clear evidence that Syria has systematically tortured and executed about 11,000 detainees since the start of the uprising, a report by 3 former war crimes prosecutors says. The investigators examined thousands of images allegedly showing dead prisoners reportedly smuggled out of Syria by a defector, as you'll hear the reporter tell you in a moment in this video. The pictures are said to show evidence of starvation, beatings, and strangulation. And as the video will warn you in the beginning, there are some images that could be sensitive to some. Emily Buchanan has this report.
The following report contains some disturbing images.
No one can have doubted the brutality of Syria's civil war. Now there's new evidence of the suffering endured by prisoners, meticulously catalogued by Syria's government. The report contains graphic images of dead bodies, many too horrific for us to show. These are just a few of the disturbing images smuggled out by a military photographer. The pictures were taken to prove executions had been carried out. The bodies show signs of injury, strangulation and severe malnutrition. Most of these prisoners died between March 2011 and last August. The inquiry team said overall there was evidence that a significant number of the deceased were emaciated and a significant minority had been bound or beaten with rod-like objects. And they concluded there's clear evidence capable of being believed by a tribunal of systematic torture and killing of detained persons by the agents of the Syrian government.
There were endless images of people starved, and of course starvation is a method of torture. Starved, and those images looked exactly like the images that was seen in Belsen and Auschwitz and places like that after the Second World War.
With imminent UN peace talks in Switzerland already precarious, the stark images of dead detainees are unlikely to make agreement easier. Emily Buchanan, BBC News.
Friends, our next story is from Sunday. We didn't have time to cover this on Sunday, but it's a report that continues daily in the news with one thing after another coming up related to this story. President Barack Obama has said he will not let controversial surveillance by U.S. intelligence services undermine Washington's ties with Germany. Now, friends, I want to be sure you understand. I'm going to read to you now the lead-in for this story. I'll have a comment and then we'll play the video report. Speaking to Germany's ZDF TV, President Obama indicated that U.S. bugging of Chancellor Angela Merkel's mobile phone had been a mistake and would not happen again. You know, I can't read the rest of this without commenting, friends. You know, are we forgetting, friends? Is this generation too young? Has the older generation failed? Has our educational system failed to convey and get across to you? Are you yourselves too engrossed with the pleasures of this world to stop and look at history and the lessons there are for us to learn from history? You know, if we do that, a lot of us would do a lot less sinning if we realized that sin is against our Creator. And yes, friends, there is a great God who created this marvelous body in which we're in. I had a wonderful conversation at dinner tonight with a friend I just met today, and we had some interesting, deep conversation and bonding even on first meeting. Sometimes that'll happen with you, with people and friends. But you know, we talked about that wonderful Creator and how ridiculous it is to have an atheistic approach, except for the fact that the people in this world who are given or who take or who wind up in the offices of our educators and our ministers who we look to for spiritual guidance. I'm talking worldwide, and what's called Christianity, but which, as Dan well said today, it's not really Christianity, it's un-Christianity, because they teach the things from the God of this world, from the tree of good and evil. And yes, there's some good on it, but when you mix evil in with good, the end result is death, and therefore it makes it evil. But to want to cater to a people that's been our enemy in a most horrific way, and who the lessons of history show you the Assyrian people want to rule the world. No matter how nice they may look for a while, no matter how wonderful the personalities are, and there are some wonderful personalities, but you've got to hold the what's in the blood of these people in check. When you hold it in check, they're wonderful. Some of the most wonderful people in the world. I'm talking about the Assyrians, the German people. They've got some of the best beer halls in the whole world. I mean, even in the United States, in California, out there in Torrance, California, the Alpine Village, one of the most wonderful places to go. They have 3 huge beer-making vats there, beer-making apparatus, huge things, and a big dancing hall there, and they've got some of the world's best orchestras playing the music there, especially on Monday nights, on the big band swing night. Greatest place in the world to take your date, if you're romancing a gal, whisk her off there. You know, you'll sync it up fast. But these wonderful, beautiful German people, you uncheck them, and they're going to line themselves up for ruling the world again, and they'll do some of the most horrible things to people that I'll talk about that some night. I used to work for the judge that was appointed by President Reagan to oversee the Artukovic trials. I had to sort out those files, and I had to read them and enter them into a computer. And some of the things the German people did to pregnant mothers, cut them open while the mother and the baby were still alive, kill the baby, put it back in the mother and sew her back up with a dead baby inside of her. How's that for an abortion? That the mother did not desire. Horrific things. But President Obama has ordered curbs on how intelligence was being collected. After the row that broke out last year, Ms. Merkel accused the U.S. of an unacceptable breach of trust. You know, that's awfully bold, friends. Germany signed unconditional surrender after some of the most horrific crimes against humanity in World War II. And unconditional surrender. So when do we let go of that? When should we let go of that? The answer is never. I'm sorry, Germany, but the United States, who won that war against you, has a right to be checking on your leaders. That's my humble opinion. But the United States, through this president, is kissing the toes, I'll put it in a nice way, of the German leader. And wait till you see where that's going to lead. Just keep tuning in as we watch the future of news related to all this. That's all the time we have tonight, friends. Thank you for tuning in tonight with me and being with me. God willing, and the creek don't rise, we'll be back again tomorrow night, Wednesday evening, for our next edition of news related to the Bible and prophecy here on Nightcast. Until next time, your host, Stephen Lloyd, saying good night, friends.
You have been watching Nightcast with Stephen Lloyd Gilpith. Nightcast can be seen Sunday through Thursday nights here on COGTV.org. Tonight's program is also available anytime on demand in the COGTV.org video archive.